Hello everyone, welcome aboard. So again we are back with the next chapter of the economic survey volume 1, and today we are going to discuss the 6th chapter of the economic survey. So let's get started. So in order to connect to the all previous lectures, so this is volume 1 of the economic survey. There are 2 volumes to it which we are discussing. In the first chapter we discussed about enhancing the efficiency of the market by strengthening the invisible hand of the market to achieve the goal of $5 trillion economy, which is the theme for this year's economic survey. That was our first chapter, which told us about the different ways which can be utilized for achieving this goal. And rest, every following chapter is discussing one of that way. So next chapter which we discussed was about the equal opportunities for the new business entrants. Then third chapter, we discussed the pro-business policies versus pro-crony policies and its impact on the economy. The fourth chapter, we discussed about enabling more freedom in the economy. Then fifth chapter, in the last lecture, we discussed about job and growth via export of network products. Now today we are going to discuss the improving ease of doing business in India, which will help us to achieve the goal of 5 trillion economy by 2025. So this chapter 6th is targeted at ease of doing business, which is key to entrepreneurship, innovation, and wealth creation. And our rankings have been improved significantly in the World Bank's ease of doing business rankings. So here this tells you 2 facts which are very important from examination point of view. One, that ease of doing business, that is a report published by World Bank, and it's an index where different countries of the world, they are ranked comparatively, and India's rank has significantly improved. Please tell me in the comment section what is the India's rank in 2019's ease of doing business index published by the World Bank. Next, even after achieving significant improvement in this ease of doing business, there are still certain categories where India lags behind. Okay, and namely, actually this chapter starts discussion with that starting a business, registration of the property, tax payment, and contract enforcement. These are the 4 areas where India's performance is still poor, not very good. So India is this chapter. In this chapter, we are going to discuss India's performance around these 4 indicators in which we are lagging against the best countries in the world, or the countries who have best performance around these indicators, as well as our peers like China or the BRICS countries. Okay. So this is a snippet I have taken from the economic survey itself. Here, global comparison, which has been done with the best ranking countries. So let's say New Zealand has one of the best rankings in ease of the doing business. And if we compare India's performance, so see, number of procedures for starting a business in India as of now is 10, whereas in New Zealand, it is just 1. Okay, then the time or number of days which is taken in India to start a business is 17 or 18, whereas in New Zealand it can be started in even half a day. Okay, similarly, registration of property, if you see, the number of procedures in India is 9, whereas in New Zealand it is 2. If you take number of days, is around 50 to 70, whereas in New Zealand you can register a property in 3.5 days. Similarly, you can compare the payment of taxes, even enforcing the contracts. Please remember, guys, you do not need to remember all this data. Okay, this data will not be asked in the exam, and you don't need to remember this all. It's just for our understanding, which you can use while answering your prelims question, or you can use this in your mains answer writing. Okay. Similarly, if we see peer comparison, means usually the BRICS country or countries whose developmental status is almost similar or comparable to India, like BRICS country, China, Brazil, or Indonesia. So there also, if you see, we are doing better, like let's say Brazil or Indonesia, but we are doing poor in comparison to China. Same goes for registration of property. Somewhere we are better, but somewhere there is a scope of improvement. So that is what this chapter is trying to point out, that even though we have achieved significant improvement in ease of doing business, still we have scope for improvement, especially in these four areas of starting a business, registration of property, tax payment, and contract enforcement. Okay. So let's move ahead. This one of the reasons this survey tries to find out, or the challenge which it tells for the poor performance of India in this four property is the density of legislation and the compliance laws which are available. So there is plethora of laws if you are going to initiate any business, and there are a lot of legal requirements. For example, manufacturing units have to comply or conform to around 7,000 compliance items, which is not very good for initiating or running a business. So actually, in all the upcoming slides, the survey has taken case studies of different things, and there it has tried to come up with their performance and then the suggestions. Okay, so let us see one by one. So first, if you take the example of starting a business in India, and for example that business supposed to be a restaurant. Okay, so number of licenses required to open a restaurant in India are significantly more than elsewhere. So there are too many licenses which you have to acquire. And if you compare it with China and Singapore, they need only 4 licenses, any restaurant, for opening. Whereas in India, there are several more. For example, in Bangalore, you need 36 approvals. In Delhi, it is 26, and Mumbai, 22. In Delhi and Kolkata, you also need to have a police eating house license also, along with all these requirements. Okay. Moving ahead. In construction business, so from the World Bank Ease of Doing Business report, Hong Kong occupies the top position in this category. In construction business, it is the best performing country. So in Hong Kong, it takes just over 2 months to obtain a construction permit. Okay, whereas if we take the example of national capital Delhi, there the time to require a construction permit is almost 4 months. Okay, also to get a water and sewer connection, it is 35 days in Delhi, which is the capital of India. So imagine what will be the situation in other parts of the country. Okay, and this performance is after the significant improvement of India in the last 5 years. So even though we have improved, there is still a lot of scope for improvement. So till now we have seen 2 examples, one of opening a restaurant or starting a business, another one was of construction business. Let us see the scale of business in India, whether we are having large scale business enterprises or whether we are having small scale enterprises in India, and what is the situation in our neighboring countries or peer countries. So most manufacturing units in India have small capacities. See, it's a challenge. If you have big capacities, the cost of production, it gets reduced. We get benefited from something called as scale of economies. Okay, and because of this small manufacturing units, our manufacturing efficiencies are low, and which is a disadvantage in the global supply chain. If you remember the discussion in the last lecture, we said that India has to become export oriented country, and we must become the part of global supply chain, an opportunity which has arisen because of ongoing US-China trade war. Then the survey talks about the comparison with Bangladesh, China, and Vietnam, where more than, and pay attention to this, more than 80% of the market value of export is by large enterprises. Whereas India, if you see, it's just the opposite. More than 80% is by small enterprises. So this affects our scale of business as well as the performance of our economy. Okay. Also in India, first we have small units which are not very good in terms of its efficiency. Second, the time taken to reach the ports for the goods. So let's say some products is being manufactured in some hinterland part of the India. It takes 7 to 10 days to reach to port. Whereas if you take the example of countries like China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, it just takes 1 day for them to reach to the port. So it is again a challenge for the economy and a scope which can be improved. Let's see the situation of trading across borders or the import export thing. How is our performance there? So the trading across borders, it actually here it tries to analyze the time and cost which is associated if you want to send something out of India to some other country, or if you want to import something or buy something outside from India and cross the border towards India. Okay. So globally, transportation by ports is most favored, followed by railways and roads, whereas in India, it is the opposite. So see, this is an example of the questions, how the UPSC sometimes uses the information given in the economic survey. So this can be one part which can appear as a statement in your questions. That statement 1, transportation by port is the most favored, followed by railways and then roads globally. Statement 2, in India, the situation is same. So that will become incorrect because in India, the situation is just opposites. Then the survey talks about a scheme which is known as AEO. Okay. So this is the scheme which has been initiated actually by World Customs Organization in order to improve this importing and exporting process across the world. So let's take a look at this scheme. Authorized Economic Operator or AEO is a program under the World Customs Organization's SAFE framework. Okay, the SAFE framework aims to facilitate global trade. So there are 3 tiers in AEO or Authorized Economic Operator. It's sort of a certification. So AEO T1, tier 1, it is verified on the basis of document submission only. Okay. So if the process of document submission is very easy and smooth, then a country's ports or let's say airport or seaport, they can have AEO T1 certification. Then AEO T2, in addition to document verification, the World Customs Organization will also verify your on-site methods, mechanism and infrastructure, whether it allows very smooth processing of its import and export, and after verifying that, it will give you the status of AEO T2. Okay. Now AEO T3 is the highest tier. When you have been the AEO T2 for let's say at least 2 years, or you have brought very transformative changes in your services, procedures and processes, then after complete verification, you will be given this AEO T3 certification. So India is trying to achieve this certification. Why? In order to smoothen and fasten its process of import and export. Okay. Now this chapter tells us about the case studies about import and export, and it tells us where we are doing good and where we are doing bad. Okay. So let's start. So first case study, it has told us this is about AU, not the electronics, carpets and apparels. So if we take the example of carpets and apparels, which are imported and exported from India. So mostly like we export apparels to the USA, carpets are exported to outside, as well as we import carpets as well. So we have tried to achieve this AEO, Advanced Economic Officer Certificate, which has significantly reduced the number of days in which a shipment takes to depart from India. But still it takes inordinate amount of time within the country. So even though we have improved, but still there is a lot of scope for improvement. Okay. Another observation which the survey makes in terms of case study of carpets and apparels is import process in India, it takes less time than the export process. So please remember this. This can be another piece of information which can be asked in prelims. Okay, so this shows that still we have too much time lag, and plus import is taking less time than export, so we can improve the export as well, plus both the processes. So this shows that achieving significant efficiency gains in the case of seaport is possible, because most of this import and export, this happens through seaports. Okay, now if we take another example of electronics, which is actually in a better situation, where India is performing not just better, some places it is even the almost best in the world. This case studies suggest the following conclusion. So I'll just tell you what the economic survey has represented here. I have just given you the conclusion part, that if there is an electronics item which has to be transported or exported from Bangalore city, it will take almost 3 hours to reach to Kempegowda airport, which is the airport in Bangalore. From that airport, it will take 2 to 4 hours for putting in the clearance in the customs department. And after that, the travel time, let's say if it is going to the Hong Kong, it will just take 5 hours. So in this short amount of time, any equipment can be, or any goods of electronics can be exported from India to the Hong Kong. So the process in Indian airports is vastly superior to those at seaports for both import and export. So in the last example of apparel and carpets, we saw the example of seaport, where there is significant improvement which can be done for import and export. Okay, and AEO, so Bangalore airport itself is AEO certified. It has improved the process significantly, and it has reasonably smoothened even for non-AEO operators importing and exporting electronics. What it is trying to say, even the operators who doesn't have this AEO certification, there also the time for import and export of electronics has been reduced significantly. And this process which we have achieved is very good, and it is even better than the international standards. So we can say the same has to be applied for the seaports and for other export and import items. So conclusion, this chapter talked about the World Bank ease of doing business. There is a large scope of improvement in all 4 categories which we discussed. Also the laws, rules and regulations in manufacturing and services, that has to be reduced. As we saw, the density of regulation is too much. There are too much licenses which are required. Plus there is a scope for streamlining our seaport services in order to reduce the time which is needed for exporting or importing anything. So in order to achieve this streamlining, logistics can become a very key indicator which can reduce the inordinate delays in loading in the custom process. Logistics is the facilities which are provided, the transportation facilities on the road, the uploading or taking down the events or the goods which are coming at the seaports. So we need to reduce this delay in the Indian seaports. And the process for imports, as we have discussed in that, is better than those for exports. We saw in the last slide. So the large variance in the process time means that exports are forced to account for uncertainty by padding extra waiting time. Okay, whereas imports are smoothened and there is less time which is needed for import. Also, import and exports of electronics through Bangalore airport is found to be world class. Okay, and the same process has to be adopted and replicated in the seaports. As we saw, there are still problems in the case of carpet and apparels, so which will improve our ease of doing business rankings. Again, let's just quickly go through the do's and don'ts which will increase our chances of selections in the prelims examination. And stay tuned, there is a lot more which is coming for you from this economic survey. So thank you all for joining. Thanks a lot.